Going from living with our parents to starting families of our own is a huge cultural shift for anyone. But for Delphine Brandt, it also meant marrying an American and moving from her home country of France to the United States when their first child was only 6 weeks old. The Brandt family has been adapting elements of both French and American culture to create their own distinct family culture ever since. From wardrobe.
I don't think French moms let their kids dress themselves.
To discipline style.
And I remember my oldest one throwing a huge fit. And my parents being there, and my dad said, well, why don't you spank her? And I just answered, I don't think she'll stop crying if I spank her.
And of course, food.
Over my dead body, my children will not eat peanut butter. I thought it was just the most disgusting fast food. and now I'm sending Uncrustable every day for lunch.
This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Delphine Brandt grew up in France and met and married her American husband Doug while he was there playing professional basketball. They moved to the United States shortly after becoming parents so Doug could start medical school. It was a lot of change all at once. A new country, a new culture, and a new stage of life.
I was a very young mom, and I had no peers. Like my age group, all my friends and friends had not even considered getting married or have kids yet. So there was a big gap. I was a 22-year-old mom. More common in the U.S., absolutely less common in France. That was the first kind of thing to battle with. So you always need a peer when you're a new mom. You kind of look at your friends have done it before. So my models were American moms, but yet I would remember how I was raised by my mom or my aunts.
I was lucky enough to be one of Delphine's American mom peers when we both lived in Minnesota. My oldest son and her middle daughter were about the same age. I instantly admired her calm, graceful demeanor and her sense of humor. It was so fun to reconnect with her for this interview, and I'm so excited for you to get to know her too. One of the first big decisions Delphine had to make as she started her own family was about how she wanted to work. This is such a personal and delicate decision for any mom, as we weigh family tradition, cultural expectations, financial considerations, and our own vision for our lives. It's especially complicated if we make a different decision than our own mothers or our friends. It can feel like a referendum on their decisions, even if that's not our intent. Even before she met her American husband, Delphine had already decided to break from mainstream French culture on this point.
There's I wouldn't say it's a fashion. You're going to have to understand my Franglish. Kind of like an attitude, but it's a culture attitude. There's a modern mom out there in France that is very different than the modern mom that I'm aware of in the United States. Although I live in a small town here, right? And I'm surrounded by friends that also chose and were able to choose to stay home. In France, it's still looked down if you stay home. Yeah, it's kind of a negative thing to stay home with your children. You're not quite as accomplished as a woman.
So did that make it hard for you to make that decision?
No, because I made it here. We moved here. Leona was 6 weeks old, and Doug started med school. She was 9 weeks old. And it had already been one of these conversations. When we were dating, I think it's the first thing I kind of said to him, that my goal in life was to raise our children. And with his American background and him having his mom staying home, he was like, yeah, sure, great, let's do this. But when Leona was born and we stayed with my parents for the first 6 weeks, we were in limbo between France and the U.S. because Doug was starting med school. And my mom was working, and she had worked all her life. And she said to me, so what are you going to do in the U.S.? We were having a conversation. And I said, well, my plan is to raise my kids and just being a stay-at-home mom. And she looked at me and said, well, don't you have any ambition? And that really hurt my feelings.
Yes.
And I had a really hard time defending that without hurting her feelings. it was very difficult for me to say, I didn't like you to not be home, because I also enjoyed all the aspects of her working full time. She had a great job. She had a great social position. Economically, they were bringing 2 salary. Therefore, I was an only child, and I had everything I wanted in a respectful way. They taught me well, but so I know that her full-time job was bringing a lot of, I didn't struggle. We didn't struggle financially, but I struggled not having her home until 7:30 at night. This is a dual feeling. So I was proud of her for working, but I missed her terribly.
Yeah.
But how do you say that to your mom without hurting feeling that the reason you want to stay home is because you don't want to give the childhood to your kids that you had? That sounds terrible, right?
Yeah.
Because she's a great mom. She was a great mom, but I missed it. So it was quite of a difficult conversation to have. And it has changed. She had said many times that I made the best choice. I mean, she's been only complimentary. I think she was afraid for my well-being and my curiosity, and I've been able to just break out of just motherhood and do other things that are, not just scrubbing toilet and little nose. You know what I mean?
Since she had such an abrupt immersion into American parenting culture, I asked Delphine what surprised her about parenting in the U.S. versus how she was raised in France.
The first thing I struggled with was the over-explaining things to children. And it sounds really negative the way I say it. So what I just don't want to do today is bash the American way and say the French way is the way to go. Absolutely not, because I'm literally probably 90% American way as far as mothering. But at the beginning, what I remembered, it was just really difficult for me to understand is the kids that would act out, would throw a fit, or just being uncontrollable would just get this amount of time of explanation and one-on-one and eye-to-eye level. And I know this has been studied, and I know there's lots of literature that it's important to talk to your children like they are adults. But there was some point where I was like, I said no, and you don't need an explanation. I said no, and this is the rule, and you're going to follow it. And so I felt like I was such a mean mom compared to my fellow American moms. And you do things as a mom sometimes, especially when it's your first one, I suppose. It's more of a reaction or more of this is how it's been done with me, and there's a lot of things that my parents did really right. So I think I'm going to do it. And I guess with age and the more kids you have, also the more patience you grow. So I guess the French mom doesn't parliament much with their children. I would to summarize it. Now it's against the law, but I think it passed 5 years ago. Before 5 years before that, the spanking was not outlaw. It's outlaw in France right now. I was spanked, and I remember my oldest one throwing a huge fit. And my parents being there, and my dad said, well, why don't you spank her? And I just answered, I don't think she'll stop crying if I spank her.
Good point.
But it was just like already, and I think it's a generational thing too, not just necessarily a cultural thing. But my parents were like, oh, a good spanking, and you're like, well, no.
Another big culture shock was the food.
Oh, my set down stone rules with my older one, I followed to really good. And then as I got older and more children, the more the rules went out the door, and I kind of went along with what the kids decided to do.
Yeah.
But my oldest one ate everything, tasted everything. And when we started to do finger food, well, my friends in Texas would start just spreading food on that tray, on the high chair.
Uh-huh.
you know, that child. And that in France, as soon as they can start eating, we were already giving them a fork and a spoon and a plate. And I spent a lot of time, I would spend 2 months at a time in France when she was little, because I missed home, and it was very easy for me to travel just with her. So it was a kind of a mixed, definitely mixed culture. And I couldn't understand that parents were throwing food like that in the tray and let the kids just fed for themselves, basically. That was difficult. So I was already trying to make her use her fork, which when you think about it, it's extremely frustrating. What you want is them to eat. Who cares if they don't master the food until they're 3, right? So choose your battle. But I didn't, and I did it because it was the proper way to teach your kids. And I would imagine that a pediatrician in France would advise you to just use the fork as soon as you can, where in a pediatrician in the U.S. might advise differently too. Very different. And then my mother-in-law came to visit one time, and I think it was, Leona was past a year old, and she made a peanut butter and jelly for lunch.
Uh-huh.
And I about lost it. Not to my mother-in-law, but to my husband. I think I grabbed him, and we went into the bedroom, and I said, over my dead body, my children will not eat peanut butter. I thought it was just the most disgusting fast food. And now I'm sending Uncrustable every day for lunch.
That is great.
You just change. But yes, there were some foods that in my French mind were absolutely unacceptable. They were snacks. Like peanut butter was a snack, right? So Leona ate everything, tried everything, would actually gain weight in France so much. She would eat so much. She loved everything. And we would come back to the U.S. and she became this picky eater. It was difficult. I would have to say that in France, there's a culture of food that it's really easy to just make your kids not picky eaters and not snackers, because everybody is on board. Whether you take them to daycare, whether you take them to preschool and school and they eat their lunch there, everybody has the same idea of what a very well balanced meal is in general.
Uh-huh.
So it's not like you have to fight with the teachers like, no, they shouldn't have goldfish for snack. How about you give them a sliced apple? So the teacher is already thinking that way. So I can see how it is much an easier task for French mom to stick with a good diet, eliminate like fake, sugars that are not like, we don't tell our kids don't eat sugars because we feed them fruits, and sugar and fruits are, the good sugar to have. You can't go wrong with fruits. There's just a general, I would say, a general approach to food in France. It's almost like everybody around your kid is not going to let them snack, and snacks are incorporated in the normal meal plan. So it's for every little French kids have what we call a 4 heures, which is in translation means a 4 o'clock. And at 4 o'clock, it's okay to have a snack. And so usually it can be a pain au chocolat, even if it sounds like it's a pastry, but it's okay. They're going to run it. They're going to burn it off. They're going to, it's good calories. They're young. And because French people have late dinner between 7 and 8, they understand that the kids have to have a snack at 4, where in the U.S. we eat at 5, 6. And therefore, by 8 p.m., if they're not in bed, they're hungry, and then we let them have an ice cream for a snack. And then they go to bed on that bad sugar. And so different approach. Fruit right after dinner. I've been a big, you want a dessert, let's have a fruit, and let's tell your brain, this is it. I'm very satisfied. I have this satisfying fruit or yogurt or something sweet, and then they don't reach for ice cream, or they don't want 30 minutes later a bedtime snack, because my husband is huge on bedtime snack, and I have to fight. He was born in 73, kids of the 80s. Parents were not foodies, so ice cream for bedtime snack was not a problem. He's super skinny, never fought with weight issue. And so for him, it was like, well, let's have a bit of snack. Let's have an ice cream. And ice cream for me, it's a treat, and therefore it should be once a month. If you're good, once a week, but not part of your daily food chart. It's nowhere on the food chart anyway, ice cream.
Right, right.
And so some days I just let it go because our kids are lucky enough to be pretty thin. And not that I have a weight issue, but I just don't want them to struggle. I want them to be happy in their body. And so I want them to eat everything they want, but I want them to understand what they're putting in their body might just create some issue later. And I don't want them to have that. I want them to be healthy all the way.
That's great.
So it's not a weight issue. I'm not a skinny French woman. I wanted the ice cream to be a treat, so a special treat, not every day or every week. So I try to implement that fruit after dinner, like right after when they're done with their main course. I want them to have a yogurt or a fruit, and I swear that it does give your brain this like last little bite of satisfaction. Okay, you're done. That's a French trick.
And then there are the differences in wardrobe.
I don't think French moms let their kids dress themselves.
Ah.
You know, the color coordination and pattern coordination, and I laid out clothes for Leona to go to school every night, and to teach her that you don't put this color with that color, or that you don't do polka dot with. And then it went away with my last one. Clara can pretty much do whatever she wants. But first they go to school they have a uniform, so that kind of solved the problem. But when it's weekend, she has a ton of clothes, and she goes for the same yoga pants and the same t-shirt. And, well, I let it go. But I would say, yes, we don't let this Punky Brewster style happen a lot in France. I don't know who's going to know Punky Brewsters or remember.
I do.
Even.
When I asked Delphine about what her 3 daughters think about their French heritage, she wasn't quite sure.
I don't know. 17, 14, and 9 years old, these conversations might come when they're a little bit older.
Yeah.
And they'll reflect. You don't reflect as much when you're 17. It's just what it is. Life it is, the way it is. And I don't know exactly. It's just so part of who they are that I don't know that they comment on anything that right now comes to my mind. Oh, they love to go visit. They love the food. They've learned to taste everything. They also learn that sometimes in places when we go, or family members or certain restaurants, you can't find ketchup, and it's okay. You can eat your meat without ketchup. But, these just little things. I think it makes my children a little bit more aware and accepting other culture by just being understanding that when they go to my parents' house, it's really small. There's one bathroom. It's just a smaller scale, everything, and it's okay. We're happy, and people live that way. And then, just to be able to see that other countries that are just as fantastic as the United States just do things very differently.
Yeah, what a gift to be able to give them that perspective. So. That's really cool.
Yeah. And it made me grow, too. I think I'm a better person for having this double culture, for being American. I think I'm a nicer person, because in general, Americans are nicer and more gentler and polite. And that taught me that. So I'm not saying I'm a nice person. Oh gosh, I'm throwing myself some flowers right now. It's not what I mean by that. It just allowed me to realize, French people are grumpy and rude. They don't have to talk to each other like that. We could all just talk to each other like we do in the U.S., and it works just fine too. I'm pretty lucky, and I'm lucky that I can go back home as often as I can, because I have friends that are from other countries and don't have leisure and the chance to be able to do that. And so in that sense, I know I'm very privileged to be able to travel every year.
Yeah, and to be able to keep that relationship with your parents. Do your kids speak French?
Yes, my oldest one is fluent. My middle one, Josephine, is dyslexic. So we realized that when she was 2.5, I was speaking fluent in French at home, and she started to really dissociate with me. And then as I learned about dyslexia, that's normal. Being able to just juggle with two different languages was too difficult for her.
Yeah.
And so we decided, not knowing about dyslexia, I had a gut feeling that we needed to stick to English. So I started to only speak English. Poor thing, French mom speaking English all day long. But and so we unfortunately lost a lot of French. Leona is still fluent. Joe understands when I speak French, but can't converse. Okay. And then Clara could have totally been fluent. Then we were in this routine of speaking English. And the more I grew older in the U.S., the more I had friends. And so I'm surrounded by Americans.
The language barrier can be difficult at times, especially since Delphine's mother doesn't speak English. But even the two daughters who don't speak French still find ways to connect with their culture and their grandparents.
Kids have a way to connect with their grandparents other than speaking. And so I'm not saying it's always been easy, and sometimes I feel like my parents are maybe grandparents number 2 because of that reason.
Right.
But it is what it is. Again, we try to see them as much as we can. We try to travel a lot with them when we are in Europe, or when they come visit. We do a lot of things, so we try to create memories. And my kids will have that.
Yes.
They might not have the long conversation with their grandparents, but they'll have another way to fondly remember about them. So I'm not trying to make the language barrier just the issue. It's been a great thing for our relationship to see each other the way we do, because when with them, we know the time is counted, and so we all are on our best behavior, and we don't argue, which in a regular situation, we were just the 3 of us because I'm an only child, and the 3 of us have very strong personality, and there's a lot of sparks.
Got it.
So it's been a blessing probably to be away like that.
Oh, that's so, I just love hearing about your life. It's so fascinating.
Oh, you're so nice. That's not that fascinating. I'm going to do laundry as soon as we hang up. So that's I'm just like and I won't be in my high heels and red lipstick on. I'm yoga pants. Just so you know.
Thank you for listening to the How She Moms podcast. If you like it, tell a friend. The bigger the community, the more ideas. There are lots of ways you can add your ideas to the How She Moms community. We have a Facebook group where we share ideas about upcoming topics and help each other solve problems we're facing in motherhood. You can also follow How She Moms on Instagram for quick tips and ideas. And you can go to howshemoms.com where you'll find transcripts of episodes and lots of other great resources. Special thanks to my mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.